Microsoft's bringing gaming to the cloud, but it's not what you think. Microsoft, gaming, cloud. In the world of Microsoft, that's almost sort of the same thing because they have Xbox Cloud Gaming, which allows you to bring your Xbox games to the cloud and then to basically any endpoint or through saves. Microsoft, what I'm trying to say here, is tied in really deeply with the cloud. It's Azure backbone infrastructure to deliver games and content all over the world and to just about any single endpoint here out of beta in the very near future. But Microsoft made an interesting hire and they kind of went out on a media showcase with it that they hired Kim Swift. Now, if you don't recognize that name, that's okay, but many of you likely have, and she is known for her work on Portal. And more specifically, she was also recently at Google working on Stadia. Now, with Stadia, we all know what happened here. Google kind of just said, hey, we're not going to do like internal gaming studios. Like, it's just not for us. It's not working out. And they went a completely different direction, basically meaning like, hey, we're going to buy IP and throw it on Stadia, hope that it works, and hopefully Stadia survives and lives a long, healthy life. And I honestly hope that it does. I don't want Stadia to go anywhere because it's better competition for Microsoft and everybody else, and it's better for you, dear listener. But what I'm getting at here is that Kim Swift, or Miss Swift, is now working over at Microsoft, working on cloud-native experiences and games for Microsoft. This is really, really interesting stuff because this is Microsoft officially signaling out loud and broadcasting the fact that they are going to start actively developing cloud-first gaming experiences. And it's going to be really interesting because there's a lot that can be done here. Because when we think about games today, and realistically, the games that we see that come out of this cloud gaming sort of R&D, whatever you want to call it, are probably going to look very similar to what we do today, right? You have a game, you play it, and it looks great, and it's awesome, it's a lot of fun. But one of the challenges is that your hardware is finite. The Xbox Series X that you buy today, yes, Microsoft will be able to optimize it and unlock more horsepower, but it is a finite number of cores, a finite number of threads. There's only so much RAM. That can never be changed. But when you run games in the cloud, there's elasticity. They need more RAM. Well, it's just available in the VM, and they need more compute. It's all possible. But you have to develop with this in mind, and that is what cloud native gaming's first. You may have heard this in the application world. You can't really just take a desktop-based app and throw it in the cloud and expect performance gains because it's not really a cloud native application. It wasn't designed for that type of an infrastructure. Games are very, very similar. They're designed for endpoints like the consoles, like your PCs. And Microsoft is looking at this and saying, hey, that doesn't really make sense for where we're headed. We have this cloud gaming. We have Game Pass being the key here. And Game Pass is available on phones. It's available on desktop PCs. It's available in the browser, I should say more specifically. It's available on your console. If it has a screen, more than likely there's some sort of way to access Game Pass, if not today, more than likely in the future. And so Microsoft wants to start thinking outside the Series X tower, outside the box, if you will, because hey, games aren't only being played on those types of devices. Now, some people are going to like absorb this information and be like, well, that just means they're going to tone down the graphics so that I can play it on my mobiles. Well, that's not true either because we already know that they're upgrading the series or the racks for Game Pass and game streaming and all that stuff to Series X hardware, meaning that, hey, there's going to be a decent amount of horsepower behind that. And more importantly, the fact that they can upgrade them real quickly and seamlessly and quote unquote easily means that future upgrades are certainly possible too. So it doesn't mean that they're going to give you watered down graphics because they're developing cloud native games. You're getting the same horsepower in the cloud that is already available in your local console. This is just an interesting approach. Now, it's going to take some, knowing what we got out of the interview that was done with Polygon, which was really good, and I'll have links down below where you can jump to it. What we know today is what Microsoft is announcing. When will that come to market? That's a really good question. They could theoretically already be working on this stuff. Actually, remember Crackdown? Crackdown actually experimented with this. Now, that experiment didn't go over super well because it was delayed and ended up being delayed because of that cloud integration. But the thing was that was effectively a beta test for Microsoft, understanding how they can take games, tie them into the cloud, have Azure-backed services, and bring it all together. Yes, it may not always go pretty and perfect the first time around, but heck, look at Cyberpunk. That game wasn't even a cloud-based game and it launched in a disastrous state. Building games is difficult. So what Microsoft is doing here is they're starting to bring that sort of mental banning and thinking of going across the cloud rather than saying we're working on an endpoint. It's a really fun strategy for Microsoft because they're primarily one of the few companies that can do it at the end of the day. You think about it, how many game companies right now are building their own games, have their own gaming infrastructure, and are out in the market today with a lot of IP where they can experiment with this. Like, for example, Stadia already gave up on IP. Amazon has signaled that that's probably the route that they're going, although it's not fully officially confirmed, but it kind of sounds like that's potentially where Amazon is going, is that they're going to license games and all that. It's not a bad model, but there's only Microsoft right now has roughly speaking 24 studios working on games. So not only can they build these cloud gaming native experiences first, they have IP that you're going to want to play it with. So it's not just some random title that just got plopped in and now is effectively in this model. It's interesting stuff. This is a big signal from Microsoft. They didn't come out with this announcement to be like, hey, this is, they have a vision and they have a plan. I more than likely think they probably have games already slated to start to using this technology. I think it's going to be a little bit of time before we end up seeing these arrive, only because building out games takes a long, look what Crackdown was, but look at just like a standard game development. You're looking for a AAA title, minimum 3 years, more than likely closer to 5 years. And if Microsoft is just starting on this right now, and I don't think they're just starting on it, but if they're really saying, now we're going to pour some money on it too because we have it figured out, we're looking at a few years before this arrives. Now, it is theoretically possible that Microsoft has already figured this out, and this is them coming out and saying, hey, look, be on the lookout for this, in the near future or the horizon. And they're already halfway down the road. We don't quite know yet, but Microsoft is doing a lot of interesting things in the gaming world right now. They're buying studios. They announced where they're headed in the market with Game Pass and how they're bringing it to all the endpoints. And now they're bringing on top of all that, their cloud native gaming experiences, which should unlock things that we may not have seen before. As of today, most games run locally, and yes, they do connect to a multiplayer instance in the cloud, probably running in a VM, but it's designed for that modeling. Think about first-player games, how they could be different, where if you're running a different asset locally and then the experience is in the cloud. Latency is going to be a very big issue here. It's already an issue with cloud gaming and every other service today, but they're going to have to improve that, which I think Microsoft is optimistic that they can. But then you can begin to think about how Microsoft is going to unlock more experiences, potentially playing across different endpoints. Imagine having different experiences if you're playing on your phone. Imagine playing a title today where you log in on your console, you play, and then there's an experience where, for whatever reason, your phone has to be included and your phone rings, and then all of a sudden you're playing on your phone next to your console. Like, these are the types of things that cloud native experiences could enable through cloud gaming from Microsoft. These are just some, thinking out loud about what they could do. Microsoft is very clearly dumping money into R&D, research and development, to understand what can and could be done. More importantly, what should be done. Some things should always run locally. Some things should more than likely maybe always run in the cloud. What can and can't be done, we don't quite know yet, but Microsoft is digging in. And so you should subscribe here, because the only BS on this channel is me.